RBL Bank Limited Q4 and full year FY20 earnings conference call. As a reminder, participant lines will be in the listen-only mode and there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions after the presentation concludes. Should you need assistance during the conference, please signal an operator by pressing star then 0 on your touchtone phone. Please note that this conference is being recorded. I would now like to run the conference over to Mr. Vishwavir Ahuja, Managing Director and CEO, RBL Bank Limited. Thank you, and over to you, Mr. Ahuja.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us for a discussion on RBL Bank's financial results for fourth quarter and financial year 2020. I am joined on this call by other members of our management team who will address any questions later that you may have. I will request you to bear with us as this is going to be a slightly longer presentation than usual, as we would like to go over important areas of our business and balance sheet. This is an unprecedented time we are living in, and the pandemic continues to impact countries and economies even as we speak. Governments, regulators and policymakers world over have taken a number of economic measures to try and alleviate the impact. The size and scale of the challenge ahead leads us to believe that even India will see a prolonged impact on the economy, industries and small businesses and individuals. In this backdrop, we continue to be very cautious, conservative and focused on preservation of the franchise. The overriding emphasis at RBL Bank shall be on balance sheet protection, and we will therefore continue to tighten risk filters further to manage and preserve credit quality, maintain surplus liquidity and conserve capital and remain well capitalized throughout. Given the macroeconomic situation prevailing pre-COVID, a great deal of this was already accomplished, but the current environment has made it all the more important. Before we get into details, I want to take a brief moment to place on record our sincere appreciation and gratitude to all our employees across the bank. Over the last month and more, these employees have been working tirelessly and ensuring that there is minimal impact, if any, to bank's customers and our operations. Primary focus has been on taking care of the health and safety of the employees, as only then can they effectively serve the customers and community. The bank was proactive in setting up quick response team to handle the entire COVID situation. This has immensely helped us over the last few weeks to run our operations relatively seamlessly. All our essential business requirements are being fully met during this lockdown by enabling work from home for the critical staff. 95% of ATMs in non-containment areas are working without any disruptions or cash outages. 98% of our overall branch network has been operational during the nationwide lockdown. We have beefed up our information security and cyber security risk measures to mitigate potential risk and threats during this period. Before I discuss details of the financials and the events relating to COVID and their likely impact on FY21, I thought it would be useful to lay out at a little higher level as to how we are seeing this period in the longer correction phase we had embarked upon in July 2019. In some manner, what would the bank be when COVID is substantially addressed? First, we had acknowledged that some concentration issues in our wholesale business portfolio would be progressively addressed. That is on the mend and will be pursued systematically this year also. Second, we had identified retail assets, cards and financial inclusion as the areas of continued investment and building eventually market-leading franchises. Even as we take additional credit costs in these areas because of COVID, we believe that post-COVID, they will revert to becoming key drivers of our ROA and gain us market leadership. To that, we add building organically a secure housing loan business. That investment is being maintained. Thirdly, expansion of our deposit franchise will continue getting the focus, except that the combination of physical and digital has become even more interesting for us, given the customer behavior during these last 6-7 weeks. Finally, continued investment in technology, cloud, analytics has helped us significantly in maintaining our services during the lockdown period. We are going to bet more on this in the months to come. This will eventually build significant operating leverage, especially in retail and rural, when these markets come back post-COVID. Moratorium. Now we will quickly talk about the COVID-related moratorium under the RBI guidelines. Please note that the data is as of April 30th. In micro-banking, our collections for March were completed before the lockdown. In the micro-banking and agri segments, which is 13.5% of our advances, we have since extended it to all our 3 million plus customers and supported it with an outreach program to almost all of them. In credit cards, which is 18% of our advances, while we offered the moratorium to all our 2.8 million customers, approximately 13 of them have availed it. 13% of them have availed it. In retail loans, which is 22% of our advances, again, while we offered it to all, 46% of the customers have availed the moratorium. On the wholesale side, which is 44% of advances, about 22% of the customers have taken the moratorium. In respect of these wholesale clients who have asked for moratorium, we have assessed their business requirements, discussed the impact and implications of opting for the moratorium, and given it to customers on the condition that all their other lenders also gave them the moratorium. We have proactively taken some COVID-related provisions on the retail portfolio, which we will discuss a little later. We have also undertaken a thorough review of portfolio under various scenarios. In the credit cost and NPA estimations, which we will detail later, our base assumption is of an extended lockdown until early June, and for life to limp back to normal in a gradual manner thereafter. Now let's talk about the performance highlights for Q4 and the full year FY20. Briefly on performance highlights for this quarter, advances grew 7% year-on-year, declined 3% sequentially from the previous quarter. Retail wholesale advances mix was 56 and 44% respectively. Our wholesale business declined 16% year-on-year, 13% sequentially, reflecting the planned portfolio redesign. Non-wholesale businesses continued to grow 35% year-on-year and 7% sequentially. Deposits overall marginally declined 1% year-on-year. However, based on the muted asset growth and the capital raise in December 2019 end, the bank maintained surplus liquidity throughout, in fact significant surplus liquidity throughout the full year. Our average LCR for the full year was 154% and for Q4 itself was 161%. As we reported previously, there was some decline in deposits in March because of specific circumstances prevailing in that month. However, we are pleased to report that all deposit segments are now stable and growing, and our deposit position as of April 30th crossed 60,300 crores, which is up 4% from March 31st. CASA deposits grew 17% year-on-year and 2% quarter-on-quarter. CASA percentage was 29.6% as of Q4 FY20. This is against 26.8% previous quarter and 25% at the same period last year. Pertinent to note that CASA grew sequentially in Q4 2020. CASA ratio, in fact, as of April 30th, on a higher deposit base, is approximately 31%. Our cost of deposits fell 31 basis points to 6.4% sequentially in this quarter. Our branch expansion continued with 62 branches in FY20, again largely in metro and urban centers. We were actually on track to end the financial year with 400 plus branches, but for the lockdown, ended the year at 386 branches. In addition, we ended the year with 1,245 BC branches, of which 651 branches were of RBL Finserv, our subsidiary. Revenue growth momentum was strong through the year, going even into the fourth quarter. Fourth quarter total revenue grew 8% sequentially to 1,522 crores for the quarter. And for the full year, the revenue was 5,540 crores, which reflects a growth of 39% year on year. Our NIMs were at 4.93% for the quarter, a new all-time high. For the full year, NIMs were 4.56% on the average, which was 42 basis points over the previous year. Net interest income growth momentum was also strong, both sequentially and for the full year. It was 1,021 crores for Q4, 11% sequential growth over the previous quarter. And for the full year, NII was 43% higher at 3,630 crores. The overall yield on advances improved 19 basis points quarter on quarter to 12.53%, again largely because of the business mix. Non-interest income also grew 3% sequentially to 501 crores for fourth quarter 2020. For the full year, non-interest income grew 32% to 1,910 crores. Our core fee income grew 29% to 1,743 crores. Our cost to income ratio was 49.7% for the quarter and 50.3% for the full year FY20. Our pre-provision operating profit, PPOP, grew 4% sequentially to 765 crores. And for the full year, it grew 42% to 2,752 crores. As a result of the above, and after taking necessary provisions, PAT for the quarter, profit after tax for the quarter, was 114 crores, and for the year was 506 crores. In terms of asset quality, our gross NPA closed at 3.62% as against 3.33% at the end of the previous quarter. Net NPA was in fact marginally down at 2.05% as against 2.07% in the previous quarter, Q3 FY20, as we took higher provisions to significantly increase our TCRs. TCR percentage was increased by 6% from 58% to 64% as at March 31st, 2020. Our overall SMA1 and SMA2 as of March end is 0.38% and 0.55% respectively, lower quarter on quarter. After taking the impact of the standstill as per the April 17th RBI circular, SMA-1 was only 0.09% and SMA-2 was 0.44%. On this portfolio, we have taken actually the full 10% provision. In this quarter, we fully recognize the remainder of the stress of approximately 300 crores on our legacy stress corporate book of 1800 crores. After taking additional provisions in Q4, the total provisioning is in excess of 60% in respect of these names. We have proactively taken 115 crores of additional provisions on account of COVID. This includes the following. Based on the April 17th circular requiring provisions on the standstill accounts, we have taken the full 10% in this quarter itself, rather than 5% each in this and the next quarter. In addition, we have taken accelerated 100% provisioning as opposed to our normal policy of 70% on the existing NPA book of credit cards. We have also taken additional contingent provisioning on the overall retail book. In order to raise our PCR, as I said earlier, we have significantly added to our provisioning on existing NPAs largely in the corporate portfolio. PCR is now 64%, sequentially 6% higher as compared to Q3 FY20. Talking about liquidity and capital position. While we have briefly spoken about this earlier, we want to emphasize that we are maintaining excess liquidity of 7,000 to 8,000 crores at present, with LCR averaging in excess of 155% or 156% in April. Even so, we continue to grow deposits sequentially and target further granularization of the same based on a much larger retail franchise, which is now operational with our additional branches. Given our recent branch expansion, we expect deposit traction to grow at a healthy pace once the restrictions are lifted. Expansion plans for FY21 encompass both physical branches and technology-led services. We have been ramping up our digital platform, and I want to briefly highlight some of the trends that we are seeing. We currently acquire 500 savings accounts per day digitally. We expect to increase this to 1,000 per day over the next 3 months. Digitally sourced RDs, FDs have doubled over the last few months, and digitally sourced deposits are now 65% of all retail deposits. Our chatbot RBL Cares, launched in January this year, is seeing more than 1 million conversions per month, of which 40% are new customer inquiries. Our CMS collections and payment volumes have surged by 40%. Our Aadhaar-enabled payment services, AEPS, have seen 3 times increase during lockdown. %300% increase during lockdown. On our capital position, our equity raise in December end has helped us maintain comfortable levels of capital. We ended the quarter with our capital adequacy ratio at 16.45% with a CET1 of 15.33%. Now let's talk a little bit about the COVID assessment. We have done a thorough bottoms-up review across our wholesale and all our segments of our retail businesses. Based on the above-mentioned base case scenario and its consequential impact, we have estimated that the level of resilience of the portfolio over a relatively prolonged recovery cycle. We have tightened our risk assessment criteria across the board. Particularly on the corporate side, we continue to reduce exposures through timely intervention and proactive management. This is further to the steps that we took in the previous year, where we significantly right-sized our entire portfolio under review. And and our new target operating model for the wholesale business, which is based on a significant debulking of the portfolio. As a result, our concentration in top 20 and top 10 and top 20 borrowers and groups has declined sharply this past year. Our top 20 group exposures have reduced by 4% to 18%. Majority of our incremental exposures this past year have been to A- and better rated customers. A- and better rated customers account for 72% of all our rated exposures now, up from 67% in FY19. The reduction in exposures in the BBB, triple B and below rating scale have further de-risked the book. All these measures put us on a better footing as we tackle COVID-related challenges. Customers in wholesale who have availed Morat are almost fully secured and with sizable levels of liquid hard collaterals and route at least a proportionate share of their operational cash flows through us, giving us enough insights on their operations. Our approval is also conditional on other banks approving their Morat request as well. We have done similar analysis on our retail portfolio. In the retail business, you would be aware that over the last 3 quarters, we have been continuously tightening our acquisition filters towards the relatively low risk segments. We did sacrifice a little bit of growth in doing this. Even on the portfolio front, we had started taking steps in bringing down exposures on the relatively riskier segments. We've done a detailed stress testing of our cards and business loans portfolio and have already laid down our collection strategy, including significant enhancement to the collection capacity. In the micro banking business, we are continuously engaged with our customers and we are quite confident that the bounce back to normalcy will be much faster. Pre-COVID, we had expected our credit cost to be much lower in FY21 as compared to FY20. However, based on the above, we expect credit costs in FY20 to be in similar range to FY20, give or take 5-10 basis points. Within this, we expect the split to change, from more wholesale and less retail to the reverse, where we expect wholesale and non-wholesale split of credit cost to be approximately 40-60. At this point, I will hand over to Harjeet, my colleague, to give you much more detailed color on our non-wholesale businesses, and I will come back later to do a wrap-up.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I will try and cover details of the non-wholesale business in 2 parts. First would be to give you some insight on the strong business performance in Q4 FY20. Then I will talk about the business environment that we expect to be there for another 6 months and how will we navigate it. As already mentioned, in Q4 FY20, the non-wholesale business grew by 35% year-on-year and is now 56% of the total advances. The retail loans business grew by 41% and the financial inclusion business by 23%. The overall growth could have been more this quarter, but for the lockdown towards the second half of March 20. About 800 crores of loans could not be disbursed in this period. Yields on the non-wholesale business were flat quarter-on-quarter at 15.6%, but were up 100 basis points year-on-year. The credit card business issued 3.5 lakh cards in Q4 FY20, taking the total number of credit cards in the portfolio to 2.8 million cards. You would notice that the new card issuance in the last 3 quarters has not shown much growth. This is on account of tightening of customer acceptance scorecards since Q1 last year and cutting out 20 to 25% of business which we felt could be vulnerable. This was done much before the COVID-19 problem came to the fore and should stand us in good stead going forward. The credit card spends were similar to Q3 FY20 at 8,250 crores. The usual growth in spend was countered by the drop seen in March 20 post-lockdown. Approximately 500 crores of spends were lost on account of the lockdown. spend reduction in March also resulted in the more than usual bump up in the term book percentage, which was at 47%. Adjusted for the spend drop, it would have been around 45%. From a risk perspective, term balances are better as the portfolio consists of 75% customers that are pure transactors, and hence these balances are at significantly lower delinquencies. The spend drop plus the moratorium-led late fee reduction resulted in a fee income drop of around 15 crores in March. The microbanking business grew by 28%, while the MSME business on the other hand grew by 25% year-on-year. In the microbanking business, we were able to complete almost the entire collection for March 20 before the lockdown. We were, however, not able to complete our new disbursements for the month. Let me now talk about the business environment outlook. We've seen gradual lifting of restrictions start from 4th of May. While the green and orange zones will see faster removal of restrictions and resumption of economic activity, we believe the red zones will take longer, and we can see somewhat of smooth movement of people only by end June, July. We have planned our business for this year accordingly. We expect the rural economy to pick up first, especially in the segments we operate in. This is on account of very low infection rates, good crop and monsoon forecast, government stimulus, and also due to localized operations of our customers' business. These are largely micro businesses providing essential services and will bounce back within a few weeks of the lockdown opening. We've been in touch with around 2.5 million customers in the villages and found that majority of them are confident of getting their businesses back on track. We today have 853 of our BC branches, around 80% of the total, which are already open, and have also seen some bit of economic activity return for our customers. In the business loan, for the business loan customers, that is LAP, it will take much longer to recover from this shock. Within these businesses, those focused on domestic markets and consumption will bounce back much faster than those having exposures to international markets in terms of imports or exports. Retail goods, groceries, essential services, pharma, FMCG, hospitals, etc. will bounce back first. Businesses linked to aviation, travel, restaurant, entertainment will have a more difficult path to recovery. Fortunately, our exposure to this segment is less than 5%, and even that is backed by collateral. The moratorium is well received by this segment as their EMIs just shift by 3 months and the tenor gets extended accordingly. The EMI amount remains the same, which does not cause any burden. In the credit card segment, we've seen a unique behavior in terms of customers trying to conserve their cash flows and opt for moratorium. This is across segments, salaried and self-employed. Salaried is about 70% of our customers, and also across risk bands. It does not even discriminate between customers who have paid in full versus those who revolve. The good part is that only about 13% of customers have availed the moratorium till end of April 20. We are also observing that customers are making payments during the month to reduce their interest cost. We expect the impact of any job losses to be felt over a period of time. Even if job losses are not significant, we can expect salary freezes, deferment of bonuses, incentives, and in some cases salary cuts, which could cause some pain. Let me outline some of the immediate focus areas we've been working on. The first is collection capacity buildup. We expect significant loading of early delinquency buckets when the moratorium ends. For this, we've already added extra capacity both at the telecalling and field level. In addition, we've moved some resources from businesses to collection for the next 3 to 4 months. On an average, the collection capacity across our retail businesses has been expanded 2.5 times. During this lockdown, our collection call centers have been operational and have been operating from home. The second focus area is regarding portfolio interventions. In our cards portfolio, you would recall that over the last few quarters, we had been intervening on customers which could be relatively riskier by reducing our exposures to them. We've been reducing limits for some, and for others, converting outstanding balances to EMIs at low rates, where we believe that their ability to pay interest in the future may be impaired. In addition, advanced early warning triggers based on the bureau and other transactions are being used to pick up risky behavior early and cut exposures. All other positive actions like limit increase, loan on phone, balance transfer, etc. have been temporarily suspended. In loans, we have put a significant part of our portfolio on daily enhanced bureau triggers. Objective is again to pick up early warning signals and suitably modify the collection strategy proactively. In microbanking, as mentioned, around 853 branches already open. We have near nil attrition and have been able to get all loan officers to join back. This was facilitated by the fact that all staff were paid their salaries in April. We've explained the moratorium to customers and they are happy with the facility and are confident that they will start paying the moment their businesses start. I would now like to give you some portfolio insights in terms of customer segments and the risk levels we are carrying in some of these portfolios. We've also included some of these points through additional slides in our investor deck this time. First, I'll talk about credit cards. 70% of our customers are salaried. The self-employed acceptance criteria for the balance is much more stringent and therefore delinquencies are only about 30 to 40 basis points higher than salaried. 82% of our customers have another credit card at the time of a card being issued. We refer to this as the carded segment. 95% of these customers have cards issued by the top 4 players in the industry. Therefore, our carded segment is quite similar to these top 4 players. These carded customers typically have loss rates that are 50% of those where there is only a single card. This has been tracked and published by the Credit Bureau. We also observe a similar trend in our own portfolio. 68% of our customers have an age greater than 30 years as compared to 60% for the industry. The higher age group denotes more stability in terms of profession and lifestyle as these customers have more work experience and also support a family. The delinquency level also decreases with age as is seen in the portfolio. 70% of our customers have an existing relationship with either RBL or BFL, Bajaj Finance Limited, where we have additional information and comfort of knowing the customer, and all these are credit tested. The most important fact is that our portfolio delinquencies, measured at 90 days past due rate, are 27% lower than that of the industry. And we should keep in mind that the top 6 issuers, including us, account for 90% of the industry. Similarly, our early vintage delinquencies measured at 6 months for 30 DPD are around 28% lower than the industry. I'll now come to microbanking. Our state and district level caps ensure that we don't have concentration in any particular geography. The top 5 state contribution has been coming down and is now at 56% versus 62% for our peers. And the peers include 2 of the largest banks in the segment, 2 large SFBs and 2 prominent MFIs. 97% of districts have less than 1% concentration to the portfolio. Only 10 districts have a contribution between 1 to 1.5%, and just 2 districts, which have been traditional districts, have between 1.5 to 2, all well within our caps. The average outstanding per customer is at 21,100 versus nearly 25,000 for our peers. Even our average ticket size for new loans is at about 34,700 versus 40,600 for the industry. Our business growth has been driven by new customers in newer geographies rather than ticket size growth. Ticket size has increased at just 7% per annum over the last 2 years. Now let me come to loan against property. Average ticket size is around 1.4 crores and has been consistent over the last few years. Average LTV on the portfolio is around 63%. 95% of the collateral is residential or business premises, majority of which is self-occupied. There is an even mix between manufacturing, service and trading, so there is no concentration to a particular type of business. Exposure to industries impacted by COVID is less than 5%. Let me now give some color on our expected business trajectory. In our base case scenario, for our retail businesses, we expect our new business to have a slow start post-lockdown, reaching 70 to 80% of our BAU run rate by September and October. Overall, for the year, new business will be slightly lower to flat versus FY20. For FY20, the cards base is likely to end around 3.3 million versus 2.8 million today, an addition of roughly about 5 to 600,000 cards. we have overall advances that are expected to grow in the region of about 12 to 15%. We have the ability to ramp up businesses should the opportunity arise in terms of stability in the economic and credit environment, and we don't expect demand to be a challenge here. With that, I'd now like to hand you back to Mr. Vishwa Rahuja for his concluding remarks.
Thank you, Ajit. So I want to leave you with a few thoughts in summary. If I have a look at FY21 relative to FY20, our journey perhaps has been delayed by 8 to 10 months because of COVID.
Mr. Darshan Shah, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead, sir, with your question.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So the first question is the numbers which you mentioned about moratorium. Is it? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So the numbers which you mentioned on moratorium, is it by number of borrowers or by value?
Number of borrowers, yes.
So by value, can you please provide the numbers? Like you mentioned, credit card, 13% of your borrowers have availed moratorium. So can you specify the value as well in each of the segments?
24% value.
Credit cards?
Yes, right.
Okay. For retail loans?
So if we give you the number across the business, entire business, it's about 1/3.
Overall, it will be 1/3.
Yeah.
Okay. So my second question is, also if you can throw some light.
So then I'll further give you further clarity. On the wholesale side, it is about 20 to 23% by value and number. And on the retail side, by value, it is a little higher. So the average is...
That's largely driven by microfinance and agri.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, fair. So my second question is, if you can provide throw some light on how do you see your BB and below book, moving in FY21? How much slippages can we expect from there, or what stress built up can you see?
Do you have access to slide number 23?
Yes.
So the question to your answer is completely detailed out there. So if you want, I can wait for you. Yeah?
Fair, sir. I will have a look at it. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Rohan from Equirus Securities. Please go ahead.
Sir, thanks for the opportunity. So just on that slide 23, when we are talking about certain exposures in BB and BBB, which are slightly lumpier, so if you would share some color on which sectors they are from and what kind of outlook do we see on those exposures?
There's no sectoral kind of story around it. It's diversified across the board there. So especially I'm only talking about the large exposures.
Right.
Again, the 4 that we've spoken about, BB we've spoken about total of about 5 exposures that are kind of relatively larger, and about a couple of them in the BBB space. Again, no single sector or anything. There's just, I think, it's kind of, as we said, diversified, secured, except for that one exposure that we clarified in BB, which is unsecured and non-funded, which is something that we are watching. Absolutely. That's a telecom sector exposure.
Right. But sir, just to understand on these 6-7 exposures, what kind of probability are we internally assuming in terms of default? Just to get a sense on what kind of slippages can come from the wholesale piece.
You want to say anything?
Yeah, I think that situation will evolve. I think out of these names, I think one odd name will be a little worried.
Correct.
I don't think in other cases, I think the reflection of the rating is not necessarily reflective of the strength of the company at this stage is what we believe. So I guess we should be worried about one odd name.
Sure. And so, like for FY21, we are guiding for higher credit cost from retail vis-a-vis wholesale. So within that, any particular segment where we are expecting a slightly higher mix in terms of credit cost within, say, cards, MFI or LAP?
So, if you look at it, I mean, in the COVID kind of a situation, you would expect credit costs to come from cards because of job losses, and you would expect the business segment or the MSME segment to give you some credit costs as well, because that segment will take time to recover. The microfinance, we do not expect, while you will have little enhanced credit costs, but I don't expect any significant increase there, because that segment or that sector, we are expecting to bounce back much quicker.
Sure, sir. And sir, just lastly on the MFI piece, if you could share the split on the portfolio value-wise in terms of, say, the rural, semi-urban and urban locations, how is it? And also, in case there are any recoveries that we have seen from the 4-5 stressed asset groups which have slipped in FY20.
So in the microfinance, almost about 80-85% of our businesses is rural.
Okay.
And that's been traditionally the way we've built this book. And in terms of recovery, I'll just let you know.
Recovery on the
corporate side.
Sorry, the question is.
So the historical book is now provided almost 60%. So at a portfolio level, we will probably be, reasonably in line with our expectations. Maybe there will be some recovery in some amount.
But he's saying, has there been any recovery? Yes.
There have been some.
If you see again, there is a slide which gives you the slippage and the recovery. So that recovery is largely from one of the corporate accounts.
Yeah, one corporate account, but yes.
Sure, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Abhishek Murarka from IIFL. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Thanks for taking my question. So, 2 or 3 questions. First, on the MFI side, you said that 800 odd branches are now operating and all your, field officers are back. But can you give some color on whether they are able to hold center meetings or collect anything at this point of time, given that, anyway, we are in the moratorium period? And if there is any kind of incremental disbursement being done either as an emergency loan or any kind of, demand, how is that being met?
So I'll answer this first. So understand that the majority of these branches have opened in the last 1 week or so, post the 4th opening. And therefore, the initial lot of loan officers have visited the villages and met customers. Too many center meetings have not yet started. That is something which will happen as we go forward. From a collection point of view, we've still had voluntary collections which are coming in, where customers walk into our branches and give that collection. Since we've not held center meetings, we've not yet introduced the emergency or the cash loan or the small ticket loan which we will do. So there is a plan to give loans ranging between 6,000 to 10,000 rupees to customers who demonstrate repayment of their EMIs. And that I think will happen over the next 30-45 days.
Okay. The second one is on cards. So, given that spends are likely to come off quite significantly, what is the outlook on your revenues and, the margins, etc., that you'll be making from this business? Second, actually, before that, through your slide on this spends, almost bouncing back right from June to March, what is the probability, you assign to this forecast? Because, end of the day, it's a forecast, and you yourself, in your opening comments, you said that things are going to slowly come back to normal over a longer period of time, starting June. So isn't this a little aggressive to expect that between June to March, the spends will be pretty much back to December, January, February levels?
Yeah. So look at it this way. If you look at the composition of our spend, you will find that the spend contribution from areas which will remain affected over a longer period of time are much lower. That's one.
Okay.
Second is that while in the month of April, we saw our spends go down by about 60 odd %.
Right.
since May 4th, there's been a 35% increase of spends from that level. Just the fact that some markets have started opening. And majority of the red markets are still not open. So there is a pent-up demand which is there, which I think will therefore be able to bring the spends up. And there are categories of spends which have therefore taken over: groceries, utilities, digital entertainment, media. Those are the spends which are coming to the fore. Insurance, and therefore that's giving us some confidence that it should come back. When I was talking about it slowly coming back to normal, was more in terms of movement of people, meeting customers, etc. in the red zone. That is what is going to take time. But the moment online opens up, and even before COVID, about 55% of our spends were online.
Right.
We expect that proportion to go even higher post-COVID.
Okay. And just lastly on this deposit, so you gave a CASA number as of 30th April. What would be the retail TD number at that time, 30th April?
I think that data is also not available. 50-some%.
Yeah. So I think branch banking source deposit should be in the 59-60% range.
Sorry, Jaideep, I couldn't get that.
The branch source deposit should be about 60%.
Slide number 30.
Okay.
Slide number 30 has that exact information.
Okay, I'll look it up.
That is 59%.
Right. So, okay. 59 as of April 30th also.
So it's March 31st numbers there.
Yeah.
April 30th couldn't be worse, it will be better.
Similar range.
Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Dhaval Gada from PSP Investment. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. A couple of questions. First is on the cost front. Just if you could give some sense of the overall FY20 OpEx, how much was attributable to the MFI and the credit card business, and the second dimension to it is in the overall cost, how much is sort of variable linked to business and can be sort of rationalized if growth doesn't pan out as expected. So some sense around the cost.
Dhaval, if you look at the cost increase in fiscal 20 versus fiscal 19, approximately 70-75% of that should be business linked and bulk of it to cards. I will probably let Hardeep elaborate, but in microfinance there won't be much cost because the BC payout is actually netted from the interest income, and besides that the cost is not a whole lot significant. Almost all business in microfinance and cards, a large chunk of it that is variable because there is a lot of origination cost which is paid upfront on origination. So if business slows down, a bulk of the cost will come down.
And overall sort of ability to sort of manage cost, do you see some sense around that, fixed, variable, and yeah.
Yeah, so I guess as I mentioned, I think the retail businesses mostly will be running on variable costs. So a slower business would mean a slower increase in cost. Overall, I would expect us to, because we invested in branches last year, which will become fully costed this year, and we'll open more branches, I would expect about a 10 to not more than a 5 to 10% increase in, actually not even 5, maybe low single digit increase in costs over the coming year.
Understood. And the second question is on margins. So I understand that the mix shift is driving this expansion along with the funding cost coming down. Just in the context that next year you do expect a rise in retail slippages, and that too in the cards and cards specifically, how does the interest income impact and overall margin outlook look like for next year?
So Dhaval, I think quite a few moving parts on margins, but I would say we should be coming off a bit on margins. Primarily because we will continue to sit on a lot of liquidity, and that would be one reason. And second, I think the mix change will not be as dramatic as we saw in this year. So I would say margin flattish to slightly lower because the yields and the benefit of cost and the yields will largely go in tandem.
Right. And the last one is on this stress test that you guys carried out on the retail portfolio. I mean, what kind of income impact have you assumed to arrive at some of the stress numbers? And if you could just elaborate a little bit of, I mean, how much bad it can be. I mean, some color around income impact and the impact on our portfolio.
Okay. So Dhaval, as for the retail side, if you look at it, we did say, and I did say that expect the growth to be in the region of about 12 to 15%. Income would actually grow.
Income levels in the economy.
No, I'm talking stress-tested number. Okay. I think the income would grow. The costs would come down dramatically because understand that the acquisition would be low.
Sorry, Harjit. Actually, what I was referring to is the existing portfolio and consumer. I mean, what kind of impact have you assumed in the borrower profile as far as their income is concerned, just to understand on the stress test? How, I mean, any detail that you could share on this, how you approach the entire stress test, that would be useful.
No, okay. So the way we've gone about doing this is that we've assumed that the current level of moratorium and therefore the deferment of, customers not paying would continue for a good 3-4 months. And that would build up your frontline buckets, which would then, the resolution rates also would come down because of the kind of impact which will happen. It's very difficult to assume the job loss rate at this moment or the reduction in salary levels. So the best thing we can do is to see how many customers would therefore not be in a position to pay and therefore would flow through, and what would be our resolution rates. So we've deteriorated both. We've increased the entry into buckets and deteriorated the resolution rates for at least the next 4 or 5 months. And that is what will result in whatever the credit cost increase that we will see.
Understood. And just one related question to this, important number would be the moratorium, because that is your anchor. How is that number moved maybe last 15 days versus where we are at the end of April? Just to understand how this percentage is moving. Is it like grown substantially in the recent weeks, or has been steady after the initial increase?
No,
because that will change the entire calculation.
Yeah. So it's a pretty dynamic number. So it actually started with a higher number in cards, and then by the end of April came down because customers then make payments. But I expect this to remain at this level till the moratorium doesn't finish. We have these, and it's a little complicated because you have cycles of payments when it happens. So every time a cycle ends, the moratorium number goes up, and then balance of the month, the customers pay back, and therefore that number comes down again. So on average, I think it's safe to assume the number which you've given will stay.
Understood. Thanks. All the best.
Yeah.
Thank you. We take the next question from Pranav Gupta from Birla Sun Life Insurance. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So firstly on the moratorium on the wholesale side, so you spoke about 22% in terms of number of customers and value awaiting the moratorium. If you could give some sense on the discussions that you had with these corporates on, what are the reasons why they're looking to avail this moratorium? Is this to conserve liquidity, or is this because of the top line impact that they might have seen? Some sense on what discussions you would have had with these customers.
It's a mixture of a lot of these things, including for some people just wanting to keep a liquidity buffer as they get through this phase. So it's a mix of reasons that we see. Given that it's not been a automatic model. So we kind of reviewed every case and looked at the COVID impact that has happened to their, impacted their business during this period, and as we see the road ahead. Broadly speaking, I think for some people it's obviously business currently not functioning at the level that they would function, or revenues not showing up. It's a broad mix, and it's come from across the scale of ratings. It's not isolated to somebody weaker or stronger. It's across the scale.
But you can add, no, that even some of the better guys.
That's what I'm saying. Across the scale.
No, they've kept the liquidity buffer.
In fact, there's a whole bunch of people who act, while given a moratorium, they've preserved that liquidity with us independently.
Right. Okay. Any sectorial color on this part, if you can provide, that will help.
Not really. Actually, there is no sectoral concentration at all. It's reasonably distributed.
Okay. My second question is on the additional provision related to COVID that you have taken. So, just to clarify, this is all the three included that you spoke about, right? So 10% on the RBI, as per the RBI guidelines, 100% instead of 70% on the credit cards, NPA, and
correct.
An additional buffer on the retail book. Is that right?
That's correct.
And this is 150.
And a general bump up in the PCR, which we have applied as, accelerated provisioning on corporates.
Right. And but the three that you mentioned earlier were a part of this 115 crore number. Is that right?
That's correct. The first three were part of 150.
First three,
okay.
And the bump up in PCR is the additional.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And just one last question. If you could quantify the positive impact of the capital raise on the margins, that would be helpful.
That should be about 20 basis points. About 20 basis points.
Okay, sir. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Manish Karwa from Axis Capital. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my question. My question is on the card segment. Hardeep, you mentioned that the April spends are down about 60%. Is that a right number compared to the?
That's correct.
So, as far as the lockdown stays, we can assume that spends would be down to this extent.
No. So as I said that from May 4th onwards, we've seen about a 35% increase in the spend. So as markets start opening, we've already started seeing the jump in the spend happen.
Okay. And on the cards front, you're saying that 24% of value have taken moratorium. Is there any difference between someone paying a 5% and revolving and taking a moratorium from a interest charge perspective?
No, the interest charge is the same, except that the 5% which he would have otherwise paid is also now revolving.
So you mean that only 5%, he could, as a customer, he could have get away by not taking a moratorium and paying only 5%.
That's right.
That's right?
Yeah, but unfortunately, it's not only the revolving guys who've taken the moratorium, which is what I was saying. There is this general behavior to conserve cash. So we've seen almost about half the customers who've taken moratorium actually never revolved. They used to all pay in full. So it's just that people have just felt that, for some time, let's just conserve cash and then see how things happen. And that is why, over the period of the month, then you see some of them start paying back and the moratorium percentage then starts coming down.
So you mean to say that 1/4 of the book has actually taken moratorium and paying 40% interest?
By balance, yes.
Okay. Oh. And on the fees related to cards, now if a large proportion of the cards are used for grocery spend, then I would assume that the per spend fees for us would also be lower, right? As I understand, groceries earn us less than cards used anywhere else.
No, not very dramatically, because it depends. The large stores, sometimes you get lower fee, but smaller stores, that's not the case. But if you really look at it, while proportionately it looks like as if grocery is really jumped up, it's only for these 2-3 months. Ultimately, it'll come back to the spends before the lockdown, where also we had 30% spends going to grocery and stores.
Okay. And look, we make about 250 crores of fees on cards. Now with spends down like 60% in April and maybe say 30% on an average for a few months, would it be right to assume that fees on cards should also decline, little bit more than that 30% number?
So Manish, so about a third of the fee comes from interchange income from spends. Okay.
Okay.
And this time, I don't know if you've had a chance to look, but on slide 51, we've given you our forecast on spends. So on a full year FY21 basis, we expect the spends per card to be about 12% lower.
Okay.
So it's on that 1/3 of fee where we will lose 12%. So fee, yes, on pure spend fee, there will be a drop. But there is going to be some increase on the interest income. Because as your first part of the question, which you were alluding to, because of the fact that many customers have availed moratorium, the interest incomes will go up.
Right. And what are the other component of credit card fees? Like 33% is on spends. Which are the other heavy components for us?
So broadly, you can divide it into something called application and processing fee, which we have, which is the fee on the card, plus whatever cross-sell we do in terms of either conversion to loans or insurance or etc. There's a cross-sell fee which we do. That's about 1/3. 1/3 is the spend fee, and 1/3 is the other fee, in which the large component is the penal fee, which for the moratorium period is what we will not get.
Right. And as a breakup of fees, you also have a processing fee, which is like 13% of the fees. That is also card related, or that's related to other loans?
No, processing fee. So there is an application fee which is related to cards. The processing fee is for a large part of that comes from all the spend conversions into loans.
So Mahesh, if you're talking about the presentation slide, that processing fee is excluding cards. Cards is all bunched up into one number. This will be more other retail and corporate.
Okay. And lastly, on the cards front, by what extent we have cut limits for cards, if you have a number, as in?
So this is basis risk band. So there are customers who would have gone through a very, very sharp reduction, but that's on the upper end of the high risk band which we see. For majority of the customers, the limits will remain where they are. But wherever we see any trigger, we've cut limits, and the limits could be cut from 20-25% to all the way down to 80%, 90% as well, depending on what we are sensing from the customer.
Okay. And roughly, in terms of number of cards, how many, number of persons, how many persons you would have cut limit? Would it be a very large number?
You could assume about 12 to 15% of the total base of 2.8 billion.
Okay. Lastly, on the cost front related only to cards, now I believe that you'll have to invest a lot on collection, which you also alluded that your collection capacity has gone up by 2.5x. Is there a scope to reduce costs on the card front itself? Because at a time when revenues would be down, costs probably may come into play, because generally it's a heavy cost product. So, but if you have to spend on collections, then the cost ratios can change on the negative side for us.
No, so look at it this way. So I am going to acquire slightly lesser cards than last year on a base which is almost 70%, which is higher than last year. Therefore, my cost to NR will drop significantly this year. And that is what is going to therefore partly take care of the credit cost increase which will come. It's despite the collection cost increasing, the other costs which are dropping is very sharp.
Okay. Okay, so pre-credit cost in the card segment, profitability you're saying could actually get better, purely because you will earn more and your new cost will actually come down.
That is right. That is right. So anytime you slow down a fast-growing business, your profitability will improve.
Okay, cool. Thanks. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mahesh.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of MD Mahesh from Kotak Securities. Please go ahead.
Hi. Good afternoon. Thanks a lot for this presentation. Just a couple of clarifications on the comments that you made to the earlier question again. Is it fair to say that the OpEx will remain flat on a YOY basis on the cards business?
On the cards business.
It will marginally increase. But the ANR is also increasing and the revenue is also increasing. Its growth is a small proportion of let's say, the revenue increase.
You would amortize you don't amortize the origination cost, right? You just kind of upfront it.
No, we don't. We take it upfront.
Just one clarification on the credit cost. I don't know whether you will answer this question, but I'll try this out again. Is there an arrangement on the credit cost between your relationship with Bajaj?
No.
So
credit cost entirely sits on our P&L.
Rated very well. So it was just one of the circumstantial things that happened. Operation. That 2-3 promoter-oriented groups which had high levels of promoter leverage. We've gone through that story many times. So it's come from there. But otherwise, no. Highly rated companies have remained highly rated companies, and their portfolio sort of correlates well to its rating profile or credit profile.
Just a clarification here is that while we identified about 1,800 crores at the beginning of the year, they don't seem to have moved into the SMA buckets in the first 3 quarters at the pace at which one would have thought. It kind of seems to be suggesting that it's either in SMA 0 or standard, but they quickly seem to have kind of come into SMA 1 and 2 and then slipped across. Is that the way to look at the 1,800 crores that you kind of indicated at the beginning of the year? That's the question.
SMA is just a statistical number. Some of it is our estimation of what will happen to these accounts, knowing that they are servicing as of today, but will get out in the next quarter or the following quarter, right? So this was estimates made by us upfront saying that these people can probably service up to this, and so therefore our estimation was right in that they will slip. So it's a question of then the SMA just becomes a statistical number as to based on DPD. So you will have to kind of isolate this 4 odd groups as an aberration to the whole process and then look at the rest.
Perfect. I'll just take it offline. My only point was that we should have seen it in SMA 1 and 2 in the previous, as in the bunch up of the 1,800 could have probably been seen in the SMA 1 and 2 in the earlier quarter. That's the limited point. I'll probably take this off.
No, we will take it offline. But if you go back to our commentary 2 quarters ago, there was not a single day DPD in any of them.
Perfect.
If you see my July 22nd commentary, when we gave a forecast that none of these names are even 1 day DPD. But we know because of the fact that circumstances that this is about to happen. Maybe we spoke too soon, but having said that, the fact is they had fully serviced their June 30th interest on time without delays. So if we flagged them, we flagged them. Now was that right or wrong? But the fact is they were neither badly rated at that time, nor did they start going into delinquency. But it was very clear that the way the rapidity with which the events were unfolding, that this is a question of a 1, 2, 3 quarter story.
Perfect. Sorry, just one last question out here. You've seen this, if you look at the frontline banks, they seem to have seen significant amount of improvement in the cost of funds as compared to where you see most of the mid-tier banks. Have you ever thought of, kind of revisiting your entire approach of, why, is there a thought process saying just be a simple credit cards and MFI bank because you seem to be building some level of expertise in that space? Is there a scope for a rethought into every business that why do we actually do wholesale banking at this point of time if it doesn't generate the required profits out here? Thanks.
Okay, we'll take it offline.
Yeah, perfect.
No, for 8 years it paid the bill so beautifully. Just because of 1 year and 5 accounts, it doesn't destroy a business. Why don't you go back and backtrack the metrics of this business over the last 6-7 years and see that on a, what do you call your, on a risk-adjusted basis, what returns it was throwing up. So it allowed us the space to build a retail business in this meanwhile. We didn't reach this scale of retail business, overnight. It has taken us some time and investments. So the fact of the matter is that we have run the wholesale business for almost 7.5, 8 years at a net NPA of less than 40-50 basis points, which is why even with slightly higher cost of funds, but with a decent margin, it may not be more than 1.5%, but with collateral income coming from fees, from foreign exchange, from cash management, the net return, net of 40-50 basis points of credit cost or less, actually became a very decent business. And it allowed us to build the institution over time and allow enough latitude to build a granular retail business. Invest in branches, invest in technology, invest in platforms, and then build a scale business. That was always a strategy. That retail will be built.
My point was not that. My point was that, look, now you have built 2 excellent businesses on the cards and the MFI platform. We're just trying to argue things the other way around. Have you just thought? Because there are card companies out in the world which have proven to be successful models as well. So that's the only point. That's the only problem. I'll take this offline. I'll take this offline.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Ravi Singh from HSBC. Please go ahead.
My question on card business again. On this moratorium, is there any difference between salaried and self-employed customers in terms of taking moratorium?
No, there is not much difference at all.
Okay. But doesn't seem intuitive, right? Because self-employed would have definitely seen some loss of income while salaried people are still seeing some
income. Yeah, the funny thing is that, forget cards, and across the industry, when you even look at loan check bounces, the rates are fairly similar for salaried and self-employed. The rate of increase of check bounces. So that's what I was talking about. There seems to be a behavior in which people are trying to conserve cash because they just want to pass a couple of months to see what is happening. And therefore, in overall quantum terms, the interest cost is not that prohibitive. While the rate may sound very prohibitive in cards, it's still, on a 50,000 rupee outstanding, the interest cost for 3 months is about 3,500 rupees. So it's not as if it's that prohibitive. And therefore, that's what seems to be driving the behavior.
Okay. And assuming this moratorium ends in May, how will you approach in this portfolio? Because everything will become due in June. You don't have option to reschedule like you have in other segments. So are the customers aware of this fact? And will you be actively offering conversion to EMI, sacrificing some income just to ensure that quality is protected over long term?
Yeah, good question. So currently in this period, there is a very active plan for these customers which is going on to ask them that should they want to convert to EMIs. And therefore, that's where we would see customers who genuinely are seeing stress would therefore do that because they can at least, both in terms of outflow as well as in terms of interest rates, they get a benefit. And the customers who've generally just taken it then don't take the EMIs because they know that once the moratorium ends, they'll just pay it back. But as I said, half the customers who've taken this have never revolved before.
Right. Just finally, I mean, when you're doing your assessment of possible credit cost from this portfolio, do you think self-employed could still be where you would see significant increase in the credit cost versus salary, even though both would be using moratorium right now?
Yes, that is correct. Self-employed would be more, but understand that the self-employed proportion, one is not very large, and second is currently from the starting base, they're just about 30-40 basis points higher in terms of their loss rates. But if I look at pure percentage loss rates, self-employed will be higher, but their contribution is not going to be very significant to the overall loss rate which we'll see on the portfolio, because ultimately it's a salaried portfolio largely.
Got it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Samir Desai from JM Financial. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the opportunity. Just wanted to ask on the cards business. You said that a sizable proportion of people who have taken moratorium are on revolver category. But if one were to think on revolvers, if the situation persists slightly longer, is there a case that the potential risk to the book which is exposed to revolvers could be substantially higher than we can kind of estimate right now? Because, I mean, these customers from an approach perspective find it better off to pay a 30% plus interest rather than repay and close the outstanding.
Yeah. So first, I had said that almost half the customers who have taken moratorium are not revolvers, which means they have always paid in full. So it's not as if the proportion of customers taking moratorium in revolvers is higher than the other. Having said that, revolvers will always be higher risk than people who pay back in full, and that's the reason why there is that interest rate which they pay.
Agree. But could the quantum of risk which which flows through could be substantially higher than we can provide?
Yeah.
Because they were probably exposed to multiple cards or something like that.
Yeah. So multiple card is not the challenge. People with more cards actually have half the loss rates. I think the issue which is there, which you are saying, is that if I've assumed if revolvers typically are at X% loss rate, which we've assumed, can they significantly increase? Possible. But the way we've stress tested it, we've assumed that the current proportion of moratorium will actually continue irrespective whether they were revolvers or transactors for 3 to 4 months. So therefore, within that, in normal circumstances, what will happen is, what is expected to happen is that the transactors will pay back and the revolvers will slightly increase. But on the overall, we've stress tested that as well. And the other piece is that there is therefore that active piece which we are doing on the EMI conversion. So these people who are in stress find it much easier if you convert their outstanding into a loan, let's say year to 2 years in tenor, at an interest rate which is lower, and therefore that gives them the breathing time to be able to service the outstanding.
Okay, fair enough. And secondly, any thoughts or commentary if the moratorium were to extend it by 90 days, how would the book react? Just the credit card or even otherwise?
I think the people who wanted morat kind of took it. So I guess that's the thing you will see now for another 3 months or so. So we'll have to wait and see as to how does it pan out. But I certainly don't see a whole bunch of people coming in unless there are huge job losses or the economy really goes down the tube completely without any government stimulus. Then yes, things could deteriorate a little further, but otherwise it's going to be more or less the same. Percentage-wise it will be the same. The customers may change because some of the guys who are just holding it for a short period of time, just conserving cash, may then decide that 6 months is too large a time for them to bear the interest.
Okay, fine. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
That's all from my side. Yeah. All the best.
Thank you. We take the next question from the line of Kunal Shah from ICICI Securities. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for such an exhaustive presentation and details. I'm trying to tie one number. You highlighted that fee had dropped 15 odd crores, say on card businesses in Q4. And then if I try to correlate one third of fee income, what you highlighted from interchange, intercharge and maybe spend per card to be like 12% lower. I think actually the impact it was only hardly 15 days in March and still we saw 15 crores kind of an impact on fee income. So wouldn't the impact be much higher if we have to look at it in Q1?
No, the 15 crore impact had a large portion of penal fee which was not there in, a lot of penal fee had to be reversed, right? Because March there was a moratorium.
Okay. So this is also
there are two elements to this. There is a spend reduction, but there is a penal fee as well.
Okay, so it's not entirely spend reduction.
No, it's not.
Okay, got it. And secondly, in terms of COVID-related provisions, so there is no contingency buffer as such. Maybe wherever RBI it was needed in terms of the SMA 1 and 2, that is what we have provided. And on credit card, maybe we have accelerated the provisioning. But besides that, maybe whatever we are seeing, that 300 crores is on the wholesale portfolio and there is no buffer as such, say for maybe in the coming quarters, whatever pain could come in from COVID.
So Kunal, I think we have one, as you mentioned, accelerated the provisioning on wholesale. Second, we have taken the 115 crore provisioning that we said, out of which part of it is towards accelerated card provisioning. The other part is on the retail portfolio where we have estimated basis some level of overdues which were existing as of March 1st. So it is on that portfolio which is naturally going to offset to that extent offset the provisioning challenge that will come later.
Okay, but besides that, there is no contingency as such. Maybe retail is also based on the overdue as on that day, yeah.
Yeah, because how do you otherwise assess, right? I mean, you have to assess basis something. And then we've also added to the stress sector provisioning. Basis sectors which we believe are, though the portfolio size for us is small,